I believe we can finally move on to drawing the rectangles on the screen. I'm gonna have a function called draw background and a function called draw bars. Now, draw background is pretty self-explanatory, but it's also going to include drawing the things on the screen that are not exactly the data, like maybe the title of the video, or maybe like a little thing in the corner that shows who's currently in first. Those things that don't really involve the numbers are going to be drawn in this function. But to start, let's just say background 0. And then for draw bars, let's just do nothing for now. I should also mention this is a good time to add in the setup function the size of your window, which is the dimensions of my final video. If I click play now, I mean, it turns out my entire monitor screen is also 1920 by 1080, so this just fills up my entire screen, but you get the idea. Let's fill out draw bars now, and it should be pretty straightforward now that we've done all the hard work. We're going to iterate through all the people. For int p equals 0, p is less than people count, p++. Okay, so what's the x coordinate? Float x equals, well, we got a function for that, value to x. We need a value. What's this value? Well, this is where we need to start thinking about which interpolation method works the best. Because if we look back at this, we need to think about what we really want. The horizontal scaling of the bar shows us the actual data. So in my mind, I want it to pass through every data point. But step sucks because it's just so jolty. So I would go with linear for the x width. Because of that, I'm gonna say float val is gonna be the person p. We're gonna take their values, and then we're going to use the lin index function, give it the index of current day to get the value. And that gives us x. What about the y coordinate? The y coordinate is going to be the rank. It's going to be whether you're first, second, third, fourth. And in my mind, that should be the weighted average, because the ranking, it does not matter as much whether it's the exact right data value. However, when bars switch positions, that needs to be more fluid than just like shortening or lengthening, because if you switch too fast, it's hard to follow. So I'm going to go with the weighted average using this function here, plop that in. The array this time is people p dot ranks. The index is still current day. And now what should the window width be? I said it should be 14 for the max to get the horizontal scaling, but for the ranking, since this doesn't affect as much of the screen, maybe I'll go with something like 5. I can change it later. I should also say that in a variable, but for now I just won't. Also, just to avoid repetition, why don't I just say person pe equals people p, because I don't like calling something from an array multiple times, and this makes it look shorter as well. So there we go, x and y are done. So what we can do now, which is going to be super fun, is draw a rectangle. So let's just do fill 255 for now. That's going to be pure white. And the bar starts on the left side of the screen and goes up until x. So the actual x coordinate is always going to be x min. The y coordinate is of course y. The width is going to be x minus x min, because add those two together and you get x. And then the height, well, we haven't really decided on that, but I think we should create a new variable called bar height. Now it's easy to calculate this because in setup we can just say, well, first of all, let me put this here. We don't know it yet. In setup, I'm gonna figure out what the difference in y coordinate is between rank 1 and rank 2, and then multiply that by like 0.9, because that'll give a little gap between rank 1 and rank 2. So this is kind of like not super elegant and also kind of inefficient, but this only is run once, so it doesn't matter. I'll call this like bar proportion, and this is going to be one of the graphic variables, which I'll set to 0.9. Let's see what happens if we click play. Okay, we get nothing. Okay, let me println what x and y are. So we get infinity for x, and we get very small numbers for y. Okay, let's print out val. Val numbers all make sense, so value to x is wrong. Okay, it looks like there's a bug with maxes, because maxes is always set to 0, which it shouldn't be. Oh, this needs to be flipped around. That's pretty dumb. We need to set maxes to val, because val isn't important to anything, but maxes is what's saved. So if I run it now, okay, we're getting bars, cool, but they're all clustered at the top and they have outlines, which I don't like. So to get rid of outlines, I'm just gonna say no stroke, pretty straightforward, but Y is not working because, I see it now, because WA index is going to give us an averaged rank. So that would be float rank equals this, and then we have to go rank to Y to fix it. And we plug in rank and there we go. Now it should all fit in the screen. See, there we go. Now I know what you're thinking. Some things are very wrong, but we get the general graph already. The first thing you might have noticed is wrong is that the first bar is not the longest. And I know why this is. That's because the second bar is actually the one with rank 0. However, I had previously set it so that if a person was not in the top 10, they had a rank of -1, which is above 0. So we need to make it so that if rank ever shows up as -1, that actually is given the value of 10 or 11 at the bottom of the screen. So let's do that right now. I'm going to go into person and change the ranks to top visible +1 if it's not overwritten. So this is going to be 11, and you might wonder, why shouldn't this be 10? Because 10 is the first bar that doesn't show up on the video. Well, if I ever have a bottom margin, then those bars, the very top bits of them, will still be visible as they linger around on the bottom. If we make it 11, then we know that they're going to be a full bar below and not visible anymore. Of course, you can tinker around with that as well. But if I do that, now we can see that the top bar is indeed the largest. The second issue that I noticed, and I'm not sure why this is happening, is that the interpolation horizontally is not working, which is resulting in all this jittering. So let's try to fix that. That's not working. Oh, this is obvious. After val should be A index +1 because we have to interpolate between two different values. Duh. So now we run it, it should be seamless. And it is. Look at that. Beautiful. I think at this point we can safely say that the hard work is done and everything else is just adding little bits and pieces to have it be readable, have a scale, have a title. But that stuff doesn't really involve new concepts. So let's do that. The first thing is, let's give every bar a color. Now in some instances, color matters. But for this one, I think we can just assign everyone a random color and that's fine. So I'm gonna say C equals new color and it's gonna be RGB. But what I can just do is say some random value between 50 and 200. That way it's never going to be pitch black and it's never going to be completely white. I gotta get rid of new. Now, when we fill in a bar, do not fill it with white. Instead, fill it with the person's color. Is it just C? Yeah, it's just C. Now we get colors, yay! Every time we run, it's gonna be different. But if we don't want it to be different every time, then we can go to setup and say random seed, some random number. And then every time we run it, we'll get the same colors. But if we don't like those colors, like maybe I don't like the greens on top, first off, here's proof that it is the same the second time. I can just change the number to something different, anything different, and I'll get a random set of new colors. Cool. Okay, so the next step is to put text on the bars so you know who's who. To do that, I use Processing's Create Font tool. Yeah, it just loads your Windows user fonts. So I'll just go to the font that I use for everything, which is Jigquiff 48. I'll go with 96 in case I want to scale up or scale down. Click OK, make sure I've copied the file name. Then I need to create a font variable, which is kind of a weird concept, but whatever. Font is now going to store all the information about that Jigquiff font that I created. So I got to load that font here. This is the file name. And then I need to say, let's use this font. To do that, we go to the draw bars function. After the rectangle is drawn, because we need the text to go after the rectangle, I'm going to say text font. That's a function that says we're going to use this font now, and then choose a size for the font. This is something that's going to come down to aesthetic preference, of course, but I'm just going to type in 48 for now. Let's fill it with white, and let's put text there. So the text is going to say the person's name. It's going to be right aligned because I want it to line up with the rightmost edge of the text, of the bar. The coordinate then is going to be the rightmost part of the bar minus some margin so it isn't like pressed up against it. And the y coordinate, same deal. It's going to be the y coordinate of the bar plus the bar height minus a margin so it isn't pressed against the bottom. Because the thing is, in processing, fonts are aligned by the bottom of the text. So let's run it and see what happens. There we go, we're starting to see names. So there's Terry, Ronnie, Jimmy, Lori, Billy, Tommy, and so on. In my opinion, it's going a bit too slowly. So let's just decrease the number of frames per day from 12-ish to like 5-ish. And also the text was a little too small to fill the whole bar. So let's increase it from 48 to 72. Now when we run it, the names are almost too big now. So maybe I'll scale it back, but it's running faster as well. So some things I want to mention. First off, okay, Billy was number 1 for like a split second. Did you see that? If we go to the fake database, look at the orange line here. That's Billy. So Billy, you can see he had a little blip of first place there. If we keep watching, we'll eventually see Billy take over and go into the millions for IQ. Maybe he was studying for his history test and was suddenly like, whoa, I know everything now. But yeah, we get fluid motion. And also if we look at the bottom of the screen, you can see there's a little gap where there's no bars. And if someone falls off the bottom of the screen, then they logically just fall off. That's all done. I'm gonna do some small tinkering just to make it look a little easier on the eyes. Okay, I think that's good enough. Now I think it's time to add the date in the corner so you know when everything is happening. So for that, I actually really don't like dealing with dates with code because, you know, dates are so inconsistent and they have so many exceptions. There's time zones, there's leap days, there's just a mess. So fortunately, I already have this code in another processing script that converts days into dates and dates into days. When I say days, I mean the number of days since January 1st, 1970. So right now we're on day 18,000 something, and it's just very helpful to have a single simple integer to describe that. So let me just copy those over. I'll plop that in. Then I also need date 2 days. The reason why you need both is because it makes it easier to type in the date that you want to jump to. Now, there's some red lines because we haven't imported all the things we need. The first thing is start date. In this code, I said that start date equals 2008 January 1st, but in our tutorial, the first date, if you remember, was 2018 January 1st. So we can just change that. The second thing we need to import is just this import Java util thing at the top. And I guess if you wanted to, you could simply just import the date library, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. Finally, I have this like code that returns the date with the month name in it. And I know that there's lots of functions within the date class that lets you do that by changing the date format, but I guess I was lazy and I just have this array of month names. So I could have more control or something. So these are the month names, and I'm just gonna put that at the top because we don't really need to care about that. But with that all done, these functions should be ready to go. So what we can do now is we go to the draw background function, which is where we're gonna draw everything that isn't data related. We're gonna say fill with white because text is typically white. Let's go text font 96. It should be large to kind of make it clear when things are happening. Text align, well, this is again based on your kind of aesthetic feelings. I feel like the date should go in the upper right usually, but that's just me. So then we can just say text days to date short and feed in the current day. Then the X coordinate is going to be the width of the whole screen, which is the width minus some margin so it doesn't crush up against the side. And then the Y coordinate is going to be like 100 or something because that's going to give room for this 96 pixel font size to fit. Now days to date short doesn't exist yet, but what I want to do is simply take days to date, which you give it a number of days and it gives you a date, And I instead want to have a function that will do this relative to the first day of the simulation, which is 2018. Essentially, I want January 1st, 2018 to return a 0, not some 17,000 value. So it makes sense that this function would just say, return what days to date is minus the start date. Were the simulation to begin on January 1st, 1970, these two functions would be the same. But with that all done, if we run it and not get any errors, okay, so I think everything is ready now, and if I click play, there we go, we get a date in the corner which shows what date it is. Pretty self-explanatory, but it adds a lot more context and makes it much more watchable. So Billy, you can see that Billy took first place sometime in April of 2018. And we can technically go back to the data and see that that's indeed true. It seemed to have happened around April 21st, I would say. But anyway, things are still happening. And now we have a way to pinpoint it all, which is very nice.